Testing, testing. Is this thing on? Is it? Yeah, I think so. I might be able to hear something through the wall, but that's okay. So, I think it's time to start. So, happy Wednesday to everybody. Welcome to Just Another Sports Podcast. I'm your host, Kyle Howard, and let's get into the topic of the day. Unless you've been living under a rock, or you're not a sports fan, or you don't have a pulse, you probably picked up on the fact that Kentucky got beat by the Evansville Purple Aces yesterday. Not only that, but they got beat at Rupp Arena, at home, as the number one team in the country. I want you to guess how many times Kentucky, as the number one team, has ever lost at home to an unranked out-of-conference opponent. Oh, wait. The answer is 0 times. They were 39-0 going into that, and they ended up losing to a team that, according to one betting site that I saw, were plus 80,000 underdogs on the money line. So had you placed a $100 bet on the Evansville Purple Aces to beat Kentucky at Rupp Arena, you would have won $80,000 on a $100 bet. That's awesome. So all I got to say is, good job, guys. I know their coach is named Walter McCarty. He played for them from 1993, 1996, if I recall correctly, and he won a national championship with them. So what was really cool is he showed in his career as a coach and as a player, he is now 3-0 against number one teams. He has never yet lost. So got to love something like that. So congratulations, Purple Aces. Congratulations, Coach McCarty, on your homecoming and on beating a incredibly large favorite on the road. That's awesome. Good for you guys, really. That's awesome. So let's go to last night's football games, the college football, D1 stuff, Maction we had last night, and newsflash, I went 2-0. That's not really a big deal when you think about it in the grand scheme of things, but 2-0 is 2-0. And for the week since I started this podcast, I am now 3-0. Seattle +6. I had ECU minus 17.5. And what was the other team I had? Oh, yeah, I had Western Michigan -1 +1, even whatever. Well, essentially to outright win at Ohio. And they did. And lucky me, I actually picked Western Michigan on some of my picks. I always make a couple bets, just a couple $1 bets with a bunch of parlays just every week. And I actually picked Western Michigan to cover, or Western Michigan and Ohio to get to the over, which was 61. And I picked them to win outright in multiple bets. And what's great is that game, my butt was pretty puckered going into the half for the over, because that game was 10-0 Western Michigan going into halftime. So I said, wow, this score has to sextuple for me to even have a chance of covering the over in the next 30 minutes in 20-degree weather. Of course, what ended up happening is it did. In regulation, the game ended up 31-31. And that's because Ohio got the ball back with about 47 seconds to go, had a controversial out-of-bounds catch, and then they scored a touchdown with, I think, 8 or 9 seconds to go. So they ended up covering the spread for me with the extra point. I'm not covering the spread, sorry. Getting the over on the extra point, which is really cool. And then Western Michigan won it outright in overtime. So that was pretty cool. So now I'm officially 3-0 for the week. So that's awfully nice. I take a little bit of pride in that. And we've got a couple of games on tonight, actually, that I would like to see if I can make some predictions for. I'm trying to remember, actually. I don't know why I don't have my... I don't actually have my picks with me for some reason. But I know that we have... Oh, my God, I can't remember. Toledo. So let me think. I'm actually my college football pulled up. I'm sorry for being unprepared. CFP and CA. So my picks for tonight... It's unranked, of course. I got some more Maction, I believe we've got tonight. Why is this going to this? I don't want top 25. Come on, man. I want to say the 14th. All right, let's see what we've got here. That's what I'm looking for. Perfect. Oh, so tonight we have got Bowling Green at Miami of Ohio. And with Miami of Ohio being a 17.5-point favorite, this was a really tough one for me to pick because Bowling Green is 3-6, and they've actually played quite well the last few weeks, especially after getting just manhandled in the first 6 or 7 games of the year, just getting whacked. I think they got beat by Kent State 52-0 earlier this year. A pretty mediocre Kent State team. And they've been playing decently well, but it is at Miami of Ohio, and Bowling Green's rush defense is atrocious. I think they're giving up like 220 a game. And Miami of Ohio has a very mediocre offense. I think they're only averaging 294 yards a game, which is very low. But Bowling Green's getting up like 446 yards a game, and they get up 200-something on the ground. And Miami of Ohio, their rushing offense is their most potent part of their offense. So my personal pick for that game is I'm taking Miami of Ohio minus 18. So Miami of Ohio minus 18, and then we've also got Northern Illinois at Toledo, with Toledo being a 3-point favorite. I'm taking Toledo minus 3. Both these games I'm kind of half and half on, but I believe these are the ones I'd go 60-40 on that I believe. I think Miami of Ohio and Toledo are my 2 favorites. I'm going to pick them to cover. It's going to be very cold at both of them. They're both in Ohio. And actually, both games last night I think were in Ohio. So yeah, the first 4 games this week are all in Ohio, where it's 20 degrees and pretty cold. I've seen that there's been quite a bit of offense. So with this one, Toledo minus 3, just because NIU's 3-6 coming in, and I think that Toledo's 6-3. I think they're both 5-4-ish against the spread, somewhere in there like that. I think that Northern Illinois is 4-5, and I think Toledo's 5-4. But they're both, to me, they're not really dependable teams. But I think Toledo's offense is just that much better, with them, putting up 450 yards of offense a game, and they're at home. And I think if it was more of like a 6 or 7 point line in Toledo's favor, I would have picked NIU. But I think with it being Toledo, I think they can win the field goal maybe at the end. Not exactly certain, but I got Toledo winning that game tonight. So that'll be my game predictions for tonight. So Miami of Ohio cover 18 or 18.5, depending on where you get it from, minus 18 against Bowling Green, and I got Toledo covering 3 against Northern Illinois. I got both the favorites tonight, and we're also going to go. Let's just finish off this podcast with let's roll into the playoff rankings. So they came out last night for. What was this? This is the college football playoff rankings, the second one that they've released now. And in those rankings, I actually got it right. I put Georgia at number 4. There's been a little bit of controversy about that just because of the fact that Alabama looked good in their loss. That's kind of the eye test thing. And it's kind of hard to make a really good argument against that just because of the fact that really after Georgia and Alabama, the quality kind of tapers off. I mean, Minnesota, of course, has a claim. They jumped up to number 8, I believe. I think they jumped up 9 spots. Minnesota's got at least a legitimate claim at this point in time. Oklahoma, all those ones are all lurking in the background. Oklahoma's got a tough route. Minnesota, as they win, they're in. It's kind of how it's going. But I agree with the way that it came out this week. I believe that it should be LSU, Ohio State, Clemson, and Georgia, just based off of the current how the teams have played this season and who they've played and who they've beaten. Obviously, Georgia's black mark on their record is the fact that they lost at home to South Carolina. And as a Florida fan, I want to knock them for that. But the big thing is you look at the offense. I believe that in that game, I think Georgia had like 510 yards of offense, and South Carolina had like 270. And if you look at the FPI and you look at all the ways, even with those yardage numbers coming out the way that they did, the chances of South Carolina winning that game were like 14%. So, I mean, they had to have Rodrigo Blankenship, who is as good of a college kicker as I've ever seen. Mr. Goggles, he doesn't miss. And he had to miss multiple 30, 40, 20-yard kicks that he doesn't miss. And that's what it took for them to, I think he missed 2 in overtime, didn't he? I'm not certain. I know he missed at least 2. One at the end of regulation, I think one in double overtime. But, it took double overtime and their kicker not making kicks like he always does. It took a miracle for South Carolina to win that game. They got doubled up in yardage. Everything went South Carolina's way. stupid picks, some bad routes by the Georgia receivers. So I think that Georgia does deserve that number 4 spot. But Alabama's lurking there, man. If they keep on winning, it's hard to deny them, especially if Georgia wins out and goes to the SEC championship game. And what would be really interesting is if LSU wins out, Georgia wins out, and then Georgia beats LSU in the SEC championship game. You'll probably get LSU and Georgia in. Most likely. It'd be really hard to deny 12-1 teams. But if Georgia loses this weekend against Auburn, at Auburn, that's a tough game. We've already talked about the fact that playing at Auburn, Jordan Hare is a voodoo stadium. For whatever reason, there's just weird stuff happens there. That's a tough game. And Georgia's, I think, a 2.5-point favorite in that game. And that would be, I don't know. I don't know how I feel about that game. I probably, to tell you the truth, I don't know if it's my homerism shining through, but I'm probably leaning a little bit in Auburn's favor. Just because Auburn has the pieces to stop Georgia on the ground and get pressure on him with Derek Brown. And you're talking about that kind of defensive line, that kind of pressure, that kind of talent on a defensive line. Their secondary is very solid. And I think that Bo Nix has played decently at home, and he's very mercurial, very up and down. But they've got the talent to play with Georgia, man-to-man. And I would not be surprised if Auburn wins this game and really throws everything into chaos. Because imagine if Georgia loses this game, then they go to the SEC championship game and beat LSU. Alabama's just sitting there. They're right. I mean, if Georgia doesn't win out and then beat LSU in the SEC championship game after LSU wins out, Alabama's probably going to get in some fashion. Unless Ohio State wins out and Minnesota wins out and then Minnesota beats them in the Big 12, then maybe they might get 2 in that way. But then it could even still end up being LSU, Ohio State. No, it couldn't be because Clemson's not going to lose. Clemson doesn't, I mean, it's the chances of them losing. The only other really good, solid team in the ACC is really just a couple like Virginia and Wake Forest. Even Virginia Tech's gotten their stuff together the last couple of weeks, but I just don't see them losing. They don't have anybody who's got anywhere near the talent that they do in the ACC. So that'd be interesting to follow. But all I got to say is seeing Oklahoma at number 10. I think Baylor was number 12. Florida at number 11. Number 9 was I know that Oregon was number 6. Oregon's sitting there lurking. Oregon and what will be interesting at the end of the year is that if Alabama wins out and Oregon wins out and then beats Utah in the Pac-12 championship game, would the committee recognize Alabama as being the better team because Alabama beat the Auburn team that Oregon lost to? Or would it be flipped around the other way where Oregon lost literally on a last-second touchdown when they were leading the entire game against Auburn at a neutral site, and with against a team when your team hasn't gotten in their rhythm yet, they haven't played away from home, it's the first game of the year. It makes you wonder, will they weight that loss? And that's probably the most interesting storyline, or really Alabama, Georgia, and Oregon, and it's not even considering Utah. Utah, the thing is, it's actually probably better for the Pac-12 for Oregon to win out and beat Utah than it would be for Utah, even though I personally believe that Utah is the better team in the Pac-12. I think Utah has shown a lot more domination during their schedule, especially on defense. Their defense is only allowing 250. They're a salty defense. I think they're allowing 258 yards of offense a game, only like 65 rushing. It's like an SEC defense this year. And they manhandled Arizona. I know because I'm an Arizona State guy. They manhandled ASU in that game. They won like 21-3. That game didn't feel like, because I think they turned the ball over 4 times. And without that game should have probably been 42-0. Seriously, that game was an absolute travesty to watch. But they destroyed Arizona State. They've destroyed everybody that's been in their path. And I think this weekend against UCLA, they're probably going to destroy UCLA. I think Oregon's been good, but I think some of those wins they've had, like that were kind of, like I think they beat Cal like 17-7. I think there's been a couple of wins there where they haven't really solidified their place. Their defense is excellent this year. I got to give Mario Cristobal, I don't remember the DC's name, but Mario Cristobal's done an excellent job bringing that team from being like a 6-5 team or 7-5 team last year, to bringing them to the prominence that he has is incredible. And their defense has been their really strong link. But I believe Utah's the better team. But I don't think that if Utah wins out, they make it in the playoff. I think Oregon would. Utah would not. So that's my analysis on the college football playoff rankings. I'm interested to see this weekend because we have the one that's really going to be the one that everybody needs to pay attention to. Two of them, actually. You have Minnesota at Iowa. And surprisingly, after Minnesota won and beat Penn State in pretty convincing fashion, they're underdogs at Iowa. And I would understand it if it was like Iowa during a night game, because we all know how McKinnick is at night. McKinnick at night is a death trap for anybody. Nobody wins there at night. For whatever reason, they've got the voodoo there. That's where Ohio State lost like 42-14 a couple years ago to really nix their chances of making the playoff. And there's just something crazy about that place. But it is a day game. I think it's either a noon or maybe 3 o'clock game, 2:30, something like that. And I think that Minnesota should go in there and go beat Iowa. I don't really have a doubt about that. And the other game is, of course, Georgia at Auburn, and that game being at Jordan-Hare. And I'd probably be a little bit concerned for Georgia with it being at Jordan-Hare just because of the way that they have the voodoo. So, anyways, that will wrap up our podcast for my podcast for the day. So I'm your host, Kyle Howard. I'm glad that you joined me today. I'd love for you to leave some either constructive or deconstructive criticisms in the comments, things I can improve on, things you'd like to hear about, things you'd like me to discuss. I probably, now that college football season's in it's really in the climax of the NFL and NCAA football seasons, I think that's going to be the majority and the dominating part of my podcast, but I'm still going to try and sprinkle in I probably should sprinkle a little bit more NBA and some college basketball, especially as playoffs come around for football and start to get more into the height of the basketball season. We're going to start working that way, and we'll throw in some hockey. We'll throw in some maybe some women's basketball. Who knows? But just let me know what you want to hear, what you want to talk about, and then I'm actually going to do on Friday. We're going to have a free-for-all or a freestyle Friday. If you have any random sports questions for me to answer that you'd like to hear my opinion on, or don't want to hear my opinion on, just want to hear me talk for no reason, leave them in the comments, and I'm more than happy to answer them, and I try to get to all of them if I could. But for now, I'm going to sign off. I hope you all have a wonderful hump day, and remember my picks for the night. I've got Miami of Ohio -18. Against Bowling Green, I got Miami covering that spread, and I've got Toledo -3 covering that spread against Northern Illinois. Both those teams are at home. I like their chances in the cold. Let's see if I can get to 5-0 on the week. So take care, guys, and I hope to see you tomorrow.